I use my knowledge of who this composer was and what he meant,
But
or she meant.
you can't go back and listen to the composer. You can go back and listen to other people's
Interpretation, yeah, excellent point. So what does that mean, Charles? I mean, so what's the fly in the ointment?
Well, the fly there is, I guess you got to try and pull the pearls out of everybody's interpretation and then make that your own.
Sure.
Make that,
Yeah, because we can't go back and ask Mozart what he meant. We don't have recordings of Mozart. We have people who have studied Mozart in depth and have become the great master interpreters of it, right? But it's like secondhand knowledge, isn't it?
It's like, do you really believe that they're the best? you know what I mean? I mean, they might be playing everything perfectly and beautifully, but is that really?
Or is that the only? Not only is it really, is it the only?
What's very interesting is I just came across Debussy playing Debussy and Ravel playing Ravel. Some of the piano rolls that they had done. I was listening to those and really, Ravel's playing. He played Oiseau Triste, and I forget what the other one was that he played. And then I also listened to Debussy's Reflections.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them were much more calmer and subdued than what I've heard other people's interpretations. It sounded to me like they were more interested in bringing color out than anything, and less interested in depth of emotion, and more interested in the beauty of how the notes were interacting with each other.
Yeah, letting the notes be the notes.
Right.
Yeah, and so have you guys heard the terminology musique concrète? Okay, musique concrète, what does that mean? You guys who know the term?
Concrete music.
Meaning?
Strict.
It is what it is, right? Don't mess with the dynamics. There is no extra musical meaning behind this. They are the combination of notes, and they are pleasing as they are, and it's for its own sake. Here it is. Play this, play what's on the page, and voila. And you can say, yes, I had that artful performance, based on what's on the page. You're also talking about a time, right? When did Debussy and Ravel live? What are we looking at? Just generically, you don't have to be like their birthdays. Early 1900s, okay. And so what are we talking about socially? Even in America or other countries, what are we talking about?
Industrialization.
Yeah, in the industrialized age, you're just past the puritanical, we're still, in the roaring 20s, and that's where you have that societal shift from modesty to a lesser modesty, to going through time. Does that have an impact on interpretation? Oh, yeah. Of course it does. Of course it does. I think what you're going to read in Casals, if you haven't gotten to this point, is when we think of the Baroque period, what do we think of in terms of musical interpretation? What are some of the rules of musical interpretation or expectations of Baroque music?
Not a whole lot of dynamic.
Yeah, terrorist dynamics, for example, the Baroque period, terrorist dynamics.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there was ne'er a crescendo or a diminuendo?
Yeah.
Of course not. And Casals would say, I don't care if you think there were terrorist dynamics back there. The music demands that we grow to this, and so I'm going to take liberty to perform. But he's going to use musical reasoning to do those things. It's not just going to be, I felt like it. What do we often resort to? It sounded good to me. And when my students tell me that, even if I believe it sounded good, my retort is, didn't to me. If you're going to give me the logic that I liked it, I'm going to say, it didn't. There. So how do you can't argue that way, right? You've got to have some rationale about why you're putting certain things into it. The highly charged emotional things, I love listening to Ravel, like the Sunken Cathedral, and the planing of those chords is just fabulous, and you just feel it, floating down, and there's not a lot that I think you have to do to it. So when somebody else comes out and they're really exaggerating something, I go, that's a little shocking. Did the boiler just blow up on the ship, underwater? What happened? The musical movie, the experience of that, okay? Beethoven in the Pastoral, the Sixth Symphony. When we talk about musique concrète, people go back and say, well, see, Beethoven wrote programmatic music. Well, how is the Pastoral programmatic? Only because the movements had these little titles, which was really unusual for the time. that the movements had titles other than tempos, maestoso, vivace, right? We had Scene by the Brook, the Babbling Brook. You know, wow, that's really kind of interesting. Now, if I tell you, I want you to think about a babbling brook, and I put on music that just goes, are you going to see a scene by the brook? Probably. Is it because of the music, or is it because I told you to think about a scene by the brook? And that's where programmatic music, with music that is nonverbal, non-choral music, because choral music inherently is programmatic. The words will definitely lead you, right? The words are such a great influence on the music that you can't help but go with that program. But by the brook, your brook and 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 my brook could be very, very different. And our memories of those things can be very, very different. So that human emotional feeling into the music resulting from the program that's been passed on is going to be influenced by my own life, my own being, my experience. Does that make sense?
Basically, what you're saying is that, I guess, everyone interprets things differently. So everyone's experiences are different, although there's like an overriding message
Yes.
that you might want to get from a piece. You know,
Right.
what I get from it might be different to what Graham gets from it, might be different to what you get from it.
To the extent that levels of experience are different. For example, if I write a piece and I'm telling you that this section is aggressivo, you know, it's aggressive. All right, how aggressive? Well, God, the composer wrote fortissimo. He put 4 F's up there, forte, forte, fortissimo, you know, which is the most redundant. If issimo is the most, then fortissimo, forte, fortissimo, the most forte, fortissimo. Okay, the point is really, really strong, right? Okay. Maybe I don't have that in me. Maybe I'm a demure individual. And when I get up and I conduct, I say, okay, play aggressively. And I don't inspire my ensemble to play that way. Or I choose that it's that kind of aggressive, it's that underlying kind of burning, you know, aggressiveness. That will be the difference of it. But I can't change aggressive music to playful music. The authentic. There must be truth in the music. The music always has to be true to the composer's intent. If the composer wrote a lullaby, I cannot turn it into an overture. Hey, everybody, we're here. Ta-da! No, lullabies don't do that. So I cannot change the dynamics so much that it destroys the intent of the composer. I cannot go so far outside of the performance practices of the period to remain authentic. So in other words, in Baroque music, I'm not going to put a ton of rubato into every phrase, and soupy crescendos and diminuendos, and I'm not going to sit there and schmaltz the vibrato out of something that wasn't meant to be there, right? We'll switch again.